Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Brought to you by the fine people at CACI, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
My quick hit comes from listener Stu Barrett. I guess you could describe it as an I told you so from economists to policymakers. The headline is, AT&T kills home internet service in New York over law requiring $20 plans.
Imagine that.
The bottom line here is New York State passed a law saying that, and there's footnotes to it, but basically ISPs are required to offer $15 or $20 plans to people with low incomes. So presumably there's some hoops you've got to go through. And not only does the law require the ISP to offer these low dollar plans, but the law also specifies the speed. So the $15 plan has to have download speeds of at least 25 megabits per second. The $20 plan has to have 200 megabits per second.
Wow. That's a lot for $5.
I'm looking at this and put aside for the moment my comments as an economist, which I'll get to, but I'm thinking back to when I got broadband for the first time. It was through AT&T. And as I recall, this would have been the early 2000s, was around 60 or 70 bucks a month. So adjusting for inflation, that's like over $100, somewhere between $100, $150 a month today. And I believe I had 10 megabits per second download. Again, this is the pricing for low-income households. I was paying 6 times what the law is requiring here and getting 1/20th the speed.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And, there's going to be a hell of a problem here, Ant, when they realize that entire neighborhoods don't have an option of switching away from AT&T.
Oh, it's worse than that, because it turns out AT&T has an option, which it is exercising, which is to say to New York State, look, we can't deliver what you're demanding at the price you're requiring. Therefore, we're not going to offer broadband at all. Goodbye.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a problem when they realize that AT&T is the only option for any number of people in the state.
Yeah.
Well, now you don't get any service at all, which really, in the real world, many choices are in fact binary.
Yeah, and this particular one is mirrored on the other coast. California just had this problem of its home insurance companies are leaving the state for the same reason. California said, well, you cannot raise your premiums above whatever the limit is. And the insurance companies are saying, well, look, we can't afford to do business at that price. We're leaving.
And everybody, they get their undies in a twist when this happens, but they forget that these are not public services. These are corporations.
Right.
And if you can't make a profit, well, then you can't do any business.
Yeah. You can't wave a magic wand and say this has to happen.
And at root, this is the same argument that has people saying, well, if you can't pay people X dollars per hour, then you don't belong in business at all.
Right. Yeah.
This is all the same argument, and it yields the same outcome in every instance.
And yet somehow the voters keep falling for it. Because honestly, I'm done arguing that the problem here is politicians. The fact is, politicians respond to voters, and the politicians would not be floating plans like this if they thought that voters knew better.
Well, people love free stuff, Ant, or cheap stuff in this instance, but this may all be for naught. I don't know if you saw the news, but there is now a 1.6% chance that an asteroid roughly 40 meters across will hit the Earth in the next couple of years.
No, 1.46. That's pretty darn high. I mean, compared to what it usually is.
1.6, up from 1. Given some new data, now it's up to 1.6. And the scientists assure us that this isn't as bad as it sounds. It's not like an extinction level asteroid, which would be about 90 meters across. This one's only 40. This would only be the kind that wipes out an entire city from the face of the Earth.
Wow.
So who knows where it might hit?
Well, I guess by the numbers, there's a 2/3 chance it hits water. But then you've got tsunami problems.
That's right. That might be every bit as bad as it hitting Earth in one place or another. But this is, interesting business. And I guarantee you that people will say something like you just did. Well, 1.6, what are the odds? There are the odds definitionally. But those are the same people who will say, let's go play the slots down at the casino next week.
Right, yeah.
The odds are much better that Boulder hits the Earth than you hit the jackpot on a slot machine.
Is this that asteroid? What was it called? APHOS something. Aphosis, I don't recall what the name is. But it's something that made a very close pass to the Earth recently, or will do recently. As I heard it, the question is they don't know what it does after that. Does it leave the solar system, or does it come back and smack us again?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the same one or not. And how could I when there are literally tens of thousands of these things circling the Earth at any moment?
Do they give us any idea when they'll be able to update the odds?
No, they do not. Oh, no, hey, it is formally known as 2024 YR4. So,
just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
That's right. They should name these things something like Susan, then we'd all remember. Right. But no, 2024 YR4. No, and I believe this is in 2025. So coming up soon.
You mean the possible hit is in 2025?
No, 2032.
2032. Well, what do you know? Right just before Social Security goes bankrupt.
All of our problems may be solved. But who knows? This, of course, Ant, leads us to the foolishness of the week. And I know you've been busy for the last couple of weeks. You probably haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to things like Facebook and Twitter. We still all call it Twitter. Why don't we just change the name
I heard
back?
one person refer to it as X recently. Everybody looked at him like they don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, that seems right. But there's been this idiocy making the rounds that Chelsea Clinton took home $84 million from USAID. You seen this?
No, I haven't.
Maybe it's best that you're busy because you're not subject to this kind of incredible foolishness. After about the 85th time I saw it on my Facebook feed, I thought, well, I'm going to do what all those people who posted it should have and go dig into this for 3 seconds and find out whether there's anything here that would even lead a person to believe this might be true. Notice all the qualifiers I just used. And no, there's literally nothing. Matter of fact, the first thing that came up was a Newsweek debunking of this, which gave all the federal money that showed up into not Chelsea Clinton's foundation, which I don't think she has one. She might, but it's not that. But the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, and it was almost no dollars at all. Right? So you can think whatever you want of the Clintons and their foundation. They're not leeching off tax dollars.
Yep. I mean, by common sense, $84 million, if that were true, some reporter would have figured it out about 3 days after the money hit her bank.
Yeah. But of course, Aunt, everything is a mysterious cabal these days. It's not as if we could all be sensible and think that things work pretty much the way we think they do. No. It has to be this sinister conspiracy of global elites. And I don't even know who to blame for this kind of bullcrap. I really don't. This is the same nonsense that had a man show up to a pizzeria with a rifle ready to shoot the place up because of the pedophiles who were holding children in the basement of the pizzeria, a pizzeria that had no basement, I might add. But here we are, right? Everybody believes anything they hear, no matter how crazy.
And this is the weird thing that so many people that I've encountered who are of that mindset, that there's this great conspiracy out there, are also the people who think that the government is incompetent and policymakers are incompetent. Now, which one is it?
It literally can't be both of those things. But, I mean, let's just start with basic stuff. If you're going to post something like this, maybe do us and yourselves a favor and check the veracity.
And it only takes a matter of seconds. Google's your friend here.
3 seconds. Knock yourself out. Go ahead and do it. People get angry when I call them imbeciles for posting these sorts of things. And they say, well, it could have happened. Like, no, it couldn't have.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
Moving from one foolishness to the next, what'd you think of the Super Bowl yesterday?
A, I did not watch it. B, I heard that somebody won who wasn't expected to win. And C, I saw some cartoon about left branch and a right branch. The left branch is Philadelphia loses, the right branch is Philadelphia wins, and they both went to the same door. There's rioting in the streets in Philadelphia.
Well, all of that I think is correct.
And that exhausts my knowledge of the Super Bowl this year.
It's just sad. It's just sad. This is
the Super Bowl or me?
American. You. It was actually an entertaining enough game. The game actually itself, not terribly exciting, although very surprising. The halftime show, probably the worst I've ever seen. I mean, it was just dreadful. I have no idea what the hell anybody was thinking putting that on my TV. But there was this fascinating thing, and I don't know if anybody really picked up on it all that much, but both Donald Trump and Taylor Swift were there.
Both of them, yeah.
This could be a Jeopardy category, people I don't care for. But anyway, they were both pretty roundly booed, which was kind of nice.
I thought Taylor Swift was largely liked everywhere. Is that not the case?
She is beloved, but put into a football context, she is dating one of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh.
And it was largely a Philadelphia Eagles crowd at the game. So, you know, this wouldn't have happened anywhere she went, but it certainly did happen here. And Donald Trump was booed, and this goes back to the cabal theory we were just getting into. Rumor has it that some of the, if not all of the television networks superimposed some favorable crowd noise over the boos.
Now, wait a minute. Taylor Swift, she's dating the football player, so she kind of has to show up. This is the middle of democratic America. Why did Trump show up?
I don't know. I can tell you that he's the first president to ever show up to a Super Bowl.
Oh, really?
Sitting president.
Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked to find that out. I can also tell you that if I were president, I'd be at every Super Bowl. If they just let me walk into a Super Bowl and go straight to a corporate box, you bet I'm going to go and watch the Super Bowl for free every year that I am able to do such a thing. And next year, if any of you corporate types out there want to invite me to the Super Bowl, I'm your man. Let's go do this. But the thing that got me thinking, Ant, was that where did we get to the point where a president gets to be a cultural icon? That's a weird thing to think about it in those terms, especially in this day and age when we're all predisposed to think of Trump in this way. He's almost messianic to his followers. Maybe I'd even take out the word almost.
Yeah, when you first raised this topic and you had suggested Obama was the first, I said Clinton was the first, but I think your definition is better. I was thinking about widely loved and popular, but you mean something different here as cultural icon.
Yeah, I really do. And you remember seeing those paintings with Obama with the sun shining down upon him and the word hope underneath it and these sorts of things. And when Obama ran for office, and his campaign did a masterful job, but when he ran for office, he was above all of it. Arguing policy, that was for all these other people. I'm about hope and change.
Right, yeah.
And the people who followed behind him really seemed to think that he was going to lead us to some sort of ill-defined promised land. Mm-hmm. Now, he didn't, but how could he have?
Well, and by the same token, people on the other side thought he was going to lead us to Armageddon, and he didn't do that either. In fact, I think in retrospect, I didn't like the guy as a president, but I think in retrospect, he wasn't that bad.
Well, yeah, but we always think that of our presidents.
The ones in the past are always better.
That's right. I mean, Jimmy Carter died and everybody said, "Aw, remember when Jimmy was president?" When Jimmy was president, nobody could stand him.
Yeah.
We tend to build up our ex-presidents here. I just want to leave that off to the side. That's an interesting phenomenon for another day. But in this one interesting way of looking at things, you can see Obama on the one hand and Trump on the other, occupying essentially the same sort of territory for their respective groups.
Right.
And it's a little hard to figure out how presidents became, for lack of a better word, messiahs. And I do think there is a lack of a better word there. If there is a better word, I'd like to hear it.
Well,
Prophet, maybe? Messiah seems better.
it does seem better, and I'm thinking that what goes with the Messiah on the part of the followers is faith. And you could say blind faith. I think that might be redundant, but it's faith, right? That's what we're left with because too few voters think through the policies, think through the implications. There's not a lot of thought and reason going on in our political space. It's just a whole bunch of belief.
Yeah, it's interesting that it fell to a president.
Yeah, why a president as opposed to, I guess the president's the only thing that unify might be the wrong word. It's the only thing common to all of us.
Yeah, unify might be the wrong word, but it's a point well taken nonetheless, right? The president and the vice president are the only two people voted on by the entire country. Mm-hmm. People tend to forget about that, right, when we think about politics, but you know, everything else is local or state. So, all right, it's the one time we all get to have a say in the same thing. And that's interesting. But how did we get to the point where we literally think the president is somehow better than the rest of us to the degree that it's almost otherworldly?
Again, I would go both directions. Half of us believe that. It's almost otherworldly how perfect the president is. The other half believe that it's almost otherworldly how horrible and evil the guy is.
But all of them, if added together, let's be honest, it's not half and half. We understand the better math.
Right.
But in the name of a colloquial conversation, how is it that both halves agree that there is a better person than the rest of us?
Right.
Because it's absurd to think that. Right? The reason why we put all kinds of safeguards on these offices is because we all know good and well that these people are not better than we are. And above and beyond the original constitutional impediments to the office of the presidency, which were not insignificant, we later had a constitutional amendment to keep anybody from doing it more than twice. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we all understood somehow that that just wasn't healthy, that we're better off if that weren't allowed. A friend of mine actually suggested last week to me privately, and I thought this was actually more interesting than I would have. He suggested that maybe we'd all be better off with a 6-year presidency with no ability to
that's interesting.
Run again.
Yeah.
I thought so too. It's something I'd never thought about it. And the minute he mentioned it, I thought, you might be onto something there. But I'll leave that for another day. It's just strange, right? When we think about the turf that the president now occupies, and maybe I could feel the Trump supporters in our audience getting agitated as we speak. So let's shift gears for a second and talk about Kamala Harris. Because you might recall, Ant, as I do, that Kamala Harris ran for president and got less than 2% of the vote and was out before Iowa.
Yep.
And then magically became vice president, which proves you don't have to be all that big a deal to become vice president. But then, through a series of machinations that no one could have predicted at the time, she finds herself in the big chair in terms of the campaign. And what did the people on the Democratic side do? She was just the greatest thing that anybody had ever seen. Remember that?
Yeah, that's after giving her 2% of the vote in the primary. Yeah.
Right. When she got none of the vote in the primary, and then she got no attention at all for being vice president, apart from the little bit of attention she got for not having done much of anything. Somehow, she became the greatest person in the history of people to a very big portion of the electorate. And that doesn't pass the smell test. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. And if you can see it on one side, you have to be able to see it on the other. So what are we doing here?
I guess, well, there was a point, at least in our lifetimes, going back far enough, that presidents weren't these cultural icons. But what's bothering me as I listen to you is I'm recalling at the same point in history that I can remember in which presidents were not cultural icons, it was also the case that few people knew who the Supreme Court justices were. You might be able to name the Chief Justice, but beyond that, they were all below the radar. At the same time presidents had become cultural icons, it seems that Supreme Court justices have taken on that higher level of publicity, exposure the presidents used to have. And what bothers me is what happens if 20, 30, 40 years from now, we've made cultural icons out of the Supreme Court justices. And these are guys that once they're in, you don't get rid of them until they die.
Well, that's the plan for right now anyway. People are moving to change that with each passing year. But, the interesting thing is, you could make a case for Kennedy, you can make a case for Reagan, right? But I really think it was Obama where we saw the tides change.
Yeah, I lived through Reagan, and I recall, look, he was more unifying as a president, if you just go by the votes, than any other modern president, but not messianic. In fact, if anything, it was the reverse. There was a good chance he wasn't electable because he had been divorced and remarried.
Right. I also remember some of the dimmer bulbs in the adult universe I was running in at that time saying, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Each name has 6 letters. Interesting. Makes you think. And I thought, God help us, nothing makes you think, apparently, but I digress. I really do think it was Obama, and I think it's reached another fever pitch under Trump. But these things happened after the rise of the 24-hour news network. So did the identification of Supreme Court justices, right? Nobody could have picked these guys out of a lineup 50 years ago. But now, because they're on our TVs all the time, it seems that plays. I don't know how deeply it plays, but I think that plays. And this idea that we could have these sorts of people coming to the fore as saviors to the public really tracks with not only the rise of 24-hour news, but the splintering of those 24-hour news networks into partisan outlets.
Well, let me push back a little bit, because I think you've correctly identified as having this messianic aura about them, Obama and Trump. But I'm thinking back to Hillary Clinton and now more recently Joe Biden, and I don't get the sense that they had that persona.
No, I don't think so. I think George W. Bush certainly didn't have it, and
Not George H.
The first George Bush certainly didn't have it. So, look, I don't think that we're always going to see this. But when we do see this, it's going to be in this place.
Could it be the case that there's an incentive to bring to the fore candidates like that, incentive on the part of the parties, because it brings out the voters?
I think that's going to be a lesson that they all figure out pretty quickly if they haven't figured it out already. And that's, I think, really, really dangerous, because it virtually guarantees that we see this sort of nonsense moving forward every single time. And, there's a little bit of evidence for this when you sit back and what do you see with big stars? Sports athletes come to mind pretty quickly. They say, well, maybe I'll run for president as they get older.
Right.
You got it. Really? And look, there are great examples of sports figures who went on to serve in government very, very well. And I'm thinking primarily here of Whizzer White, who was a football player who became a Supreme Court justice, right? So you can do these sorts of things. And there are any number of congressmen who were pro baseball players and things like this. You can trade on the fame to achieve another goal if you want, and I think that's fine. But there's a group of people, and we started by saying, Taylor Swift and President Trump were both at the Super Bowl. Do you think Taylor Swift could run for president right now and win?
Well, and win? Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I absolutely do too. And that would be a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. But all they would have to do is declare her candidacy and then make sure she never said anything.
Right.
I think she would walk to the office. And that's really, really bothersome to think about that.
Well, that's kind of odd now that I think on it, because what you're describing, in effect, is a transformation to a figurehead. That, if I'm one of the party leaders and I've got the wherewithal to lead the party, to do the mechanizations in the back room, I want someone exactly like a Taylor Swift, provided this person isn't interested in putting his or her own fingerprint on the thing. Let me make the decisions. You just attract the votes.
Well, we had a figurehead in the last 4 years. Joe Biden was a figurehead. Yeah. He did not govern. Joe Biden did almost nothing by way of governance. And if you're out there getting ready to curse me, I'm going to throw something in the show notes that you can watch that will give you an insider's perspective on just what Joe Biden did for the last 4 years. So you can yell at me afterwards, but don't yell at me before. Give it a look. Is that really what you want? Because, everybody's moaning right now that Elon Musk was unelected and therefore what he's trying to accomplish is somehow illegitimate. Well, the guys who ran the Biden administration were all unelected too. Was that illegitimate as well?
Right.
I mean, how do you start drawing lines here that don't cut right through your favorite thing? And therein lies the difficulty, right? Nobody's willing to draw the obvious line because it cuts into their favorite thing. And in order to keep on going, well, maybe they need to run somebody, I don't know, for the next election, somebody who became quite famous because he was a billionaire or parlayed that into a reality TV career or had wait a second, that's what we've got right now. Wait, no, that's not what we want. Except it is what we want collectively. How do I know? He just won the last election. Yep. So I don't know what to make of this, except to say that the presidency is in uncharted waters. Now, that might always be literally true. The presidency might always be in uncharted waters. But it's so obvious here that the rules of the game have changed. And we may end up getting president after president after president whose only qualification is that he was famous before he decided to try to become president. And does that mean I have to take somebody, as stupid as Kanye West seriously? There's a number of people out there who do take somebody as stupid as Kanye West, meaning to say Kanye himself, because almost nobody else is that stupid. Seriously, he came out last week and proclaimed his love for Hitler.
Oh, man, come on.
Right. And here's the weird part. Nobody's going to tell Kanye he can't come to the party because of what he said.
Yeah.
That's not disqualifying for Kanye. Mm-hmm. Well, how long is it going to be before somebody realizes, hey, if that doesn't disqualify him, nothing will. Let's run him.
Yeah.
Or somebody equally as horrible, if you can dredge somebody equally as horrible up from the depths. So, what we're left with here is a lot of very unseemly possibilities.
Every time we have a conversation like this, I hear in the back of my mind words from Jefferson about fearing a democracy. And that's basically it. Now, you want people to have a vote, but the beauty of a republic is you keep the people one step separated. They elect people, and the people they elect then think about and vote. And I think we've lost a lot in reducing the Electoral College to a rubber stamp. The Electoral College could have solved this problem that we're now discussing.
Well, we've democratized everything to the extent that we could have, right, within the constitutional provisions. And we're going to talk next week about something, the 17th Amendment, that was a further democratization that causes all kinds of problems that were unforeseen, right? But when you hear people say the answer to the problems of democracy is more democracy, that might be crazy. The answers to the problems of democracy are clearly not more democracy. And the founding generation knew this. And they gave us a government in which the voice of the people would be heard, would often be definitive, but didn't have to be definitive at any one given point in time. That if we really needed to do something and the people didn't want to do it, we could do it anyway. And there might be hell to pay at the next election for the people who did it, but they could do it nonetheless. And we've really gotten away from that sort of thing. And it's caused us, I think, what might be irreparable harm.
And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time,
Send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.